The moment her eyes flew open, time froze. Her voice trembled, half shock, half confusion. "What are you doing? Did you just kiss me?" My heart slammed against my ribs. The front porch, the open door, the silence between us. It all felt too loud. I pulled back instantly, hands shaking, and said the only truth I had. I was just giving first aid. Before we begin, if stories about real human moments, unexpected kindness, and small choices that change lives mean something to you, take a second to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps more than you know and keeps these stories alive here on your channel name. Now let me tell you what really happened. It started on an ordinary Tuesday evening in a quiet American suburb, the kind of neighborhood where lawns are trimmed, porch lights come on at dusk, and people mostly keep to themselves. I had just gotten home from work, loosened my tie, and stepped outside to grab a package from my car when I heard a sound that didn't fit the calm. A thud. Then a soft, sharp gasp. It came from next door. I didn't know my neighbor well. I'd seen her a few times, polite smiles, quick hellos. She lived alone, always seemed busy, always put together. That night her front door was open, and she was lying on the porch, one hand pressed to her chest, the other stretched out like she had tried to catch herself and failed. I froze for half a second. That awful moment when your brain asks, "Is this my place?" Then kindness answered before fear could. I ran over and knelt beside her. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow and fast. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out right. "I'm here," I said, trying to sound calm even though my hands were already sweating. "You're okay. I've got you." She shook her head slightly, eyes fluttering. I asked her name, no answer. I asked if she could hear me. She blinked once. I remembered a first aid course I'd taken years ago for work. It wasn't fancy, but it stuck. Check responsiveness, check breathing, call for help. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. While waiting, I followed the operator's instructions. She was breathing, but not well. Then, suddenly, she stopped responding altogether. That's when panic really hit. The operator said, "If she's not breathing normally, begin rescue breathing." I hesitated for one tiny moment. Not because I didn't want to help, but because life is strange, and awkward thoughts flash through your head at the worst times. She was my neighbor, a woman I barely knew. Her front door was open, anyone could see. Then I looked at her face again, and none of that mattered. I tilted her head back, pinched her nose, and gave a careful breath. Then another, just like I'd been taught. I counted seconds out loud, my voice cracking. I wasn't thinking about how it looked. I was thinking about keeping her alive. A few seconds later, she gasped. Her eyes opened wide, confused and frightened. She jerked slightly, then focused on me hovering above her. "What are you doing? Did you just kiss me?" she asked. I jumped back like I'd been shocked. My hands went up immediately. No, yes, but not like that. I was giving first aid. You passed out. You weren't breathing right. She stared at me, trying to piece things together. Her cheeks flushed, then she winced and held her head. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't remember. I just felt dizzy." "It's okay," I said quickly. "Help is coming. You're safe." We sat there in silence for a moment, the kind that feels heavy but gentle at the same time. The ambulance sirens grew louder in the distance. When the paramedics arrived, they took over with calm efficiency. They asked questions, checked vitals, and helped her onto a stretcher. One of them nodded at me and said, "You did the right thing." Those words landed deeper than I expected. At the hospital I stayed, longer than I planned. Not because anyone asked me to, but because it felt wrong to just walk away. She didn't have family nearby. She admitted, quietly, that she'd been under a lot of stress, skipping meals, pushing herself too hard. Before they took her in for tests, she looked at me and said, "Thank you. Really, you didn't have to stop." I shrugged, suddenly emotional. "Yeah," I said. "I kind of did." A few days later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find her standing there, looking healthier, holding a small paper bag. "I brought cookies," she said awkwardly, "and an apology for accusing you of, you know." I laughed, relief spilling out. Trust me, I'll never forget that moment either. We sat on my porch that evening, talking like neighbors who should have done this a long time ago. She told me how lonely she'd been since moving there, how she felt invisible most days, how that night scared her, not just because she passed out, but because she realized how close she came to being alone when it mattered most. "I keep thinking," she said softly, "what if you hadn't been there?" I didn't have an answer. None of us ever really do. What I do know is this: kindness doesn't always look neat or comfortable. Sometimes it looks awkward. Sometimes it gets misunderstood. Sometimes it makes your heart race and your palms sweat. But it saves lives. Weeks passed, and our small act of kindness turned into something bigger. We started checking in on each other, saying more than hello, watching out. The neighborhood felt warmer somehow, like a place where people mattered again. I think about that night often, about how close I came to ignoring the sound next door, about how easy it would have been to tell myself it wasn't my problem. And I think about how different everything would be if I had. Kindness isn't about grand gestures or viral moments. It's about choosing to care when no one is watching. It's about stepping forward when stepping back feels easier. That night, on a quiet porch, kindness took the shape of first aid, shaky courage, and a misunderstood moment that turned into a shared laugh later on. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded two strangers that we're not meant to do life alone. So if you hear a thud next door, if you see someone struggling, if your heart tells you to stop, to help, to care, listen. Because you never know when a small act of kindness might become the reason someone gets a second chance. And sometimes, it all starts with the words, "I'm here."